would never submit to being a preacher along with Srila Prabhupada.
Right. Srila Sridhar Maharaj is quoted as saying that he was an ease-loving devotee.
Anyway, he was not inclined to preach outside of India. That's
Never.
the real thing.
Right. Correct.
And the whole movement purpose was to get outside of India, to reach the rest of the world.
Well, that Prativiti Achiyatanagar Adigram, every town and village. Yeah.
Now, as far as Narayan Maharaj goes, I didn't want to get into it, but he was speaking for Narayan Maharaj. He's speaking the same thing Narayan Maharaj's followers speak. He's speaking the same philosophy. He also supports that we didn't fall. It was very clear that we did not fall from the spiritual world. I can't get into that because there's so much disinformation out there. And I have a bunch of quotes now that are that I use in this connection that prove beyond a doubt what Srila Prabhupada was saying. They generally take things out of context, or they don't understand what they're reading. You know, back to Godhead. I mean, they don't understand that we all feel, and the reason is that they're too puffed up to have the humility to understand that. Because humility is the first opulence of the conditioned soul. Unless this conditioned soul has humility, he can't understand Srila Prabhupada. One has to be humble in order to speak, in order to preach, in order to understand. I mean, this is, you know, I don't want to bend your ear, but I'm saying that that video brought up the very conflicting problems amongst our God brothers and sisters. That some of them believe we did not fall to the spiritual world. Some of them believe that Narayan Maharaj was treated by Srila Prabhupada as a person we should consult. Same thing for Sridhar. But there's a fact that I explained to you before that Brahmananda explained to me when he was here a year before he passed away, that Tamal and Giriraj came to him and tried to convince him to accept Narayan Maharaj as next Acharya of ISKCON. So Narayan Maharaj was involved directly or indirectly with the management of the movement. In fact, Giriraj and Tamal and Burjan, I've seen pictures of them practically groveling at the feet of Narayan Maharaj, showing him great loving respect and paying attention to him, as practically like a Shiksha guru.
Mm-hmm.
So they were very much, in fact, the GBC in the mid-90s got in a controversy of whether or not to become more affectionate and intimate with the Gaudiya Math. And there was a big debate in the GBC. They contacted me through Naveen Krishna and asked for my opinion. I wrote a 1.5-page letter to them, proving to them that Srila Prabhupada did not want us to associate intimately with his godbrothers because they had no heart for preaching. And in essence, that's the reason. And so Giriraj wrote me back a letter, a 1-paragraph letter, in which he said, I kept it for years, I finally threw it away, but he said, I agree with what you said. Thank you very much for your consideration, and so on, so on. So the debate ended. He was the one leading the side that wanted to have more intimate association with the Gaudiya Math.
Giriraj Swami was.
Yes, and I don't know who was on the other side, but Giriraj wrote me back. We agree with your position, and thank you very much for participating.
Mm-hmm.
So my letter demonstrated to them how Srila Prabhupada intended, and they gave an example like he put one of his godbrothers on a trust. And I said, look, Srila Prabhupada was always trying to engage himself in preaching the movement. He was always trying to engage them. The fact that he put someone on a trust that was to continue after you left did not mean you were supposed to take darshan from him. He was giving him some engagement. He was always trying to engage his godbrothers. So I made one of those that argues part of my letter, and they understood that. So I said seeking darshan is one thing, and having a person as a trustee on a temple is another thing.
Uh-huh. Okay. So you're saying taking advice, you're referring, trying to get clarity right now. You're referring to taking a shiksha from Srila Sridhar Maharaj or Srila Narayan Maharaj, that's permissible, but to be a signed trustee is a whole other deal. That's what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying, no. What I'm saying is giving them a trusteeship doesn't mean you make them a Siksha guru. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, look, he was discouraging us from taking them as gurus because they didn't have heart for preaching, and
Uh,
associating with them would reduce our enthusiasm for
uh-huh.
preaching. That's the
Uh-huh.
reason. Just by associating with them, we would be losing our momentum for preaching.
Uh-huh.
That's what he told me in the letter. You see, but that didn't end. That was a advice. But then in 1974 or 5, Srila Prabhupada came out with an all temple memo not to associate with his godbrothers. When they
Right.
came to Mayapur, not to go to the temples, not to buy their books, not to talk with them. No one should see them or talk to them without Srila Prabhupada's express permission.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 75. That was after my letter. That was after my letter.
Right.
It was written for the whole society. And he never changed that. He never reneged on that. He never to the GBC or anyone else made a change in that advice, or not advice. It was a instruction.
Okay, so what? So I'm sorry if we've gone over this before. It's I've just forgotten the way of thinking. But so okay, so you were saying he never reneged on that in 1975. So I'm trying to understand because the arguments that are brought are that I don't know if it was 76 or 77, but it was definitely later where he was saying that that the Srila Sridhar Maharaj is my Shiksha Guru. What to speak of yours? If you want answers to Siddhanta clarification, you can go to Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So it seems like it seems like Prabhupada's contradicting himself, but I know he never does.
No, he doesn't. So therefore, we first of all have to know when he said that. And look, he never wanted us to criticize his god brothers. That's why when I wrote him that letter, I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought he might be upset with me. But when I explained to him why I was writing a letter, that they were artificially thanking us for helping them spread their movement, which is total nonsense. They weren't spreading anything. So he agreed with me. But generally, he didn't like us criticizing his god brothers. That's not proper etiquette. But
Right.
he criticized them. He criticized them to us, especially to the GBC. He criticized them. And he criticized them that memo because they didn't support him, for example. Narayan Maharaj was the only person who sent him mridangas and cartels, and they had an exchange of letters and so on. Narayan Maharaj was not a godbrother, but a disciple of a godbrother. I was Guru godbrother,
Right.
Sannyas Guru godbrother, who was supporting him at that time. That was during the late 60s, right? Later on, after the devotees went to Narayan Maharaj after leaving the movement in protest to the way the gurus are behaving, their relationship changed. Narayan Maharaj they went to him for shelter. He started changing their names, like he changed Jyotirani's name, and he gave sannyas to some of them.
I asked her about that. I said, "Why do you refer to yourself as Shamarani rather than Jhanarani?" She said, "Oh, well, even when I was with Srila Prabhupada, he would call me a pet name, Sadhurani." And so this is just that she said, "It's not that I've changed my name, Narayan Raj out of affection. He calls me Shamarani, but I never thought at the time of thinking, but how come you never call yourself Sadhurani?" The name that the pet name that Prabhupada gave her.
Look,
She
I was initiated with Jyotirani,
right.
just the two of us.
Yes.
Her name is Jyotirani,
Right.
and everybody called her Jyotirani the whole time Srila Prabhupada was here. Nobody
Right.
ever called her anything else.
Right.
And she didn't change her name until she went over to Narayan.
She developed affection for him, and she likes that name. But
Yeah,
she goes Shamarani slash Janarani. She
yeah,
uses
because there's been criticism of that in recent years, and
right.
she likes to preach to devotees, and she represents the Narayana camp. Now, the Narayana camp is a whole other issue. The Narayana camp
But
issue
before we go before we go to Narayana Camp, I just want to step back for a second. So, what timeline are we looking at when you went with Kirtanananda, where he was representing the the fit, so-called fit, and you were representing the so-called unfit. What year was that? When was that?
77.
Before Prabhupada departed? No,
After he departed
November
in
14th.
November, and we
Yeah,
went to him. We went to Narayan. It was barely soon that we went there. I don't remember the exact date.
for the Shudar March. You still went like in maybe December before the end of
Yeah,
the year.
we went there very quickly because we wanted to explain to him what Srila Prabhupada asked us to do. Wanted to explain to him that Srila Prabhupada's disciples would be initiating their own disciples.
Right, but yet, I'm not trying to contradict you. I'm trying to understand. You were saying to me, your famous letter of 74, and then Brahmananda's, statement to all the temple presidents not to associate with my godbrothers. So
Right.
why did you and Kirtananda go if you have this great conviction that we should never go?
Well,
To-
first of all, the 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 GBC we had a relationship. We were supposed to be cordial, not that we associate with them. The reason I went is because the GBC wanted to do that. I didn't necessarily agree with that, but I had to represent the non-gurus somehow. If Kirtananda was going, I mean, he could go and represent the gurus. What he was going to say, I had to go there also. So, I mean, I didn't object to the going. I didn't take that as seeking advice from him. I didn't take that as breaking Srila Prabhupada's instruction. I took that as simply informing Sridhar Maharaj, who was leading the Gaudiya Math, what Srila Prabhupada told us to do.
I see. And what did you tell him?
We told him that he assigned some of us to initiate our own disciples.
Right. And that was when Srila Maharaj said, "Oh, Kirtananda, you represent the fit, the initiating gurus, and Rupanuga, you represent the unfit, the rank and file."
Whatever. He didn't say that. He just said, oh, the fit and the unfit. That's all he said.
Okay.
Oh, the fit and the unfit, referring to the fit being the initiating ones and the ones who are not being unfit. And I
Okay.
knew what that meant.
Right.
I knew what that meant. It was clear to me. His
And
attitude.
yeah.
So
What did that mean? What was your understanding?
that he was differentiating the GBC
Uh-huh.
into two parts.
Okay.
And that's his form breaking attitude. It's always been there. He did that after Bhaktisiddhanta disappeared. He helped to break up into two parts. It's a mentality. I was there in Srila Prabhupada's room when he invited Sridhar to come into his room in Mayapur. I was there with the whole GBC. Okay. And when Sridhar appeared in the doorway, Srila Prabhupada began a kirtan that was out of this world. We were all so enthusiastic, chanting, directing all of our loving devotion to Sridhar in the doorway. In fact, there's a photograph of that in which you think when you look at the photograph that we're looking at a deity. That
Right.
Srila Prabhupada was in front of a deity. And in that photograph, Shruti Kirti was jumping up and down so quickly that he's a blur in the photograph. This is a high tech camera, and he is a blur. The rest of us you can see very clearly. So that was the enthusiasm that was raining upon Sridhar Maharaj. He stood in the doorway of Srila Prabhupada's room, and the loving look of Srila Prabhupada's face in that photograph is directed to Sridhar.
What year are we talking about?
76. Okay, it was before Srila Prabhupada got ill, and so that's just part. I happened to be there when Srila Prabhupada was reaching out with so much love and so much affection on Sridhar, simply trying to convince him to join Srila Prabhupada.
Uh-huh.
That's why he said before, like, we'll make you president of ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada was doing everything he could. He said, I'll have my men come from all over the world to listen to you preach.
Uh-huh.
So he was so eager, because if Sridhar followed him, the whole Gaudiya Math would have followed him. And all their expertise, all their knowledge, all of their Sanskrit verses, and all of their renunciation could be dovetailed into the preaching work. The preaching work. You see, they were not preachers.
Right.
Srila Prabhupada was trying to dovetail the Gaudiya Math into a preaching movement.
I get it.
That's what he was trying to do all along, you see. And all along he was getting, I mean, when I first heard that Srila Prabhupada had godbrothers in 1966, I was so thankful. Oh, we have reinforcements. Someone's going to come and help us spread this movement across 3,000 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for it. Then I found out, much to my disappointment, that they weren't helping. In fact, they were hindering. And that was Srila Prabhupada's message to his godbrothers through Narayan, a disciple of his godbrother. And that message was, help, don't hinder them. The war is over. He said at Srila Prabhupada said, the war is over. What war? He was never at war with anybody. They were at war with him. So now he's saying, what he's saying is, I'm leaving, I'm departing. The war is over.
Uh-huh. And the war meaning that they minimized him. They only would call him.
So what Srila Prabhupada was concerned about was he didn't want the Gaudiya Math interfering with the movement after he left. And so that's the message he was giving to his godbrothers through Narayan, who was the go-between like. And the message was, in my humble, condensing them that, help, don't hinder them. Help, don't hinder them.
Prabhupada said that himself, or that was just your understanding?
That's my understanding of the mood Srila Prabhupada was in. And look, you got to understand something, okay? Srila Prabhupada considered me one of his personal representatives. He put that in writing.
Right.
His GBC men were given special assignment. They were to represent him. He was training us for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
I have 100 letters from Srila Prabhupada doing that. We had to understand his mission, his mood.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we were better than everybody. He picked us. He picked us. We didn't stand for election. He picked us. Mm-hmm. And whether we did a good job or not, whatever, that meant he picked them. He said, I picked my best men. So what does that say for the rest of us? Okay? If we are so bad, what does that say for the rest of us? It's not that we were so bad during the 70s. We did our job. But after Srila Prabhupada left, that was a different story. Okay, but up until then, we helped him spread the movement around the world, and we helped to manage it. He never criticized us for that. Mm-hmm. And people talk, in retrospect, they talk about, well, the GBC was rebellious, the GBC refused to have elections, blah, 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 blah. That's not true. Srila Prabhupada ran the GBC. He was the chairman. He was the boss. We had to go to see him every evening after our meeting. We went 3 or 4 days. And after each meeting, we would take to him the resolutions that we had made for his approval. And so most of them he would approve. I'd say about 95% of them. And 5% he'd add something or say, well, try this instead or whatever. But we didn't do anything without his approval.
Correct. I'm trying to understand, when Pradyumna Prabhu sent his letter to Satsarup, where he was pointing that things were starting to go sideways in ISKCON, and
he was asking for humility. He was asking for some humility.
Right. And they didn't like that.
Who?
Those who had, from what I can understand, those who had been asked by Prabhupada to continue the initiating process.
Yeah, they did. Satsarup rejected it. He said he's he's simply mimicking the Gaudiya Math. They were at that time they were saying Pradyumna's influenced the Gaudiya Math when they themselves were communicating with the Gaudiya Math. But they blamed him as getting his ideas. Like you said, we should not the initiating gurus should not sit on a higher level than their god.
Little math, something. Yeah.
They were lording it over.
But Sridhar Maharaj was warning, because Tripurari Swami told me that they are mowing over their godbrothers like tanks on the battlefield. He was warning that the 11 should be very cautious to not be rude or offensive to their non-initiating guru godbrothers and godsisters. Correct? That was my understanding. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. He was warning.
I have no information of that. He didn't speak to the GBC in that way.
Tripurari Swami told me that Sridhar Maharaj told him to do welfare work for the benefit of your godbrothers and godsisters, to care for, because he saw the massive apostasy, the massive exodus that took place when amongst those 11 there were some that were demanding us to worship them on the level of Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, when some of the godbrothers and sisters went to Sridhar, and some of them went to Narayan.
Right, and you use that expression, ISKCON refugees.
Yes.
So understanding that our godbrothers were not being grateful or loving and kind to the rank and file, can we blame them so much for taking shelter of a venerable elder Vaishnava like Srila Sridhar Maharaj or Srila Narayan Maharaj? They're looking for love. They're looking for guidance. They're looking for inspiration. Not everyone's so mature that, okay, I've got the Prabhupada's books, that's all I need. Yes, that seems to be ideal, but some are going to respond better to someone that's, pull them by the ear, right? Prabhupada said the books are one thing, but you also need to have someone to pull you by the ear. You've heard that expression?
Well, what's your point? The point is that they had reason to go, and they had reason, but not to see the Narayan or Sridhar as equal to Srila.
Yeah, I would never think that or ever say that, and I don't really know anyone that thinks or says that, but I can understand how in those communities Prabhupada's exalted position could become relativized or minimized because they develop affection for these other teachers. That I can understand how that can happen.
It did happen.
Yeah.
It did happen. And those other teachers didn't do anything about it. In fact, they received it.
It's complicated. Yes.
They received it. They received it, and their receiving it was no substitute for Srila Prabhupada's inspiration and empowerment for preaching. They were not preaching like Srila Prabhupada. They didn't have the inspiration or the empowerment to do it. Nor could they inspire or empower their followers to do it because they didn't have it themselves. That's what differentiated them from Srila Prabhupada all along. All along. From the very day that from 1936 disappearance, that's what differentiated. In fact, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur told them when they tried to engage Srila Prabhupada in management, no, he is for later. He will make a contribution later.
Right. He'll do everything. He will do everything.
Well, he did.
He
did more than everything.
Yes. But I guess what I'm begging of you or questioning.
Let me finish. So now we have them sitting at the feet of Narayan Maharaj to take shelter, and we have them sitting with Sridhar. Now, sitting at Narayan's lotus feet meant something other than what Srila Prabhupada taught them, because Narayan emphasized Rupanuga, And this Gaudiya Math also emphasized the Gayatri mantra over the initiation into Harinam. Srila Prabhupada considered Harinam initiation the most important. And because he had to make sure that there was enough faith to give the initiation in the first place. The others treat it like an encouragement. But Srila Prabhupada said you had to chant 16 rounds for 6 months and follow the regular principles for 6 months to demonstrate your faith in the holy name before I initiate you. And he says in his lecture on the 10 offenses, if someone is initiated without demonstrating that faith, they will go away in the future. So these other groups were initiated, as far as I know, still do, without an emphasis of purity and faith in the holy name before initiation. They treat the first initiation as subordinate to the second. Because in second initiation, they feel you have to emphasize more the Rupanuga, the more advanced stage. But Srila Prabhupada considered the movement's called the movement of the holy name, the Hare Krishna movement. And the Harinam is the Yuga Dharma. So it's important.
Of course.
So Srila Prabhupada stressed the importance on the 10 offense lecture he gave in LA in 1970. As an example of preaching to the faithless, he gave an example of a spiritual master who would initiate a disciple without determining his faith. And that spiritual master was an offender to the holy name. And Srila Prabhupada gave the instruction that everyone should follow, everybody. 16 rounds for 6 months, follow the principles for 6 months, because that's Srila Prabhupada's demonstration of faith in the holy name that he accepted. And that's the standard for his followers. But they don't follow that standard. The other ones, the other groups, they don't follow that standard.
Well, some chant 64 rounds. They don't just chant 16.
Well, that's not the standard either. 64 rounds is for the sannyasis in India who had plenty of time because people were doing their laundry, people were doing their cooking, people were setting their engagements, people were waiting on them hand and foot. They had plenty of time to spend 8 hours chanting. But not if you're in a preaching movement.
It's a different mood.
It's
Like I asked Giriraj Maharaj, you spent some time with Srila Narayan Maharaj. What is your experience? And he summed it up very concisely. He said, there's a different emphasis there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
That's
one devotee who was practicing the meditations that stress meditation on the Dennis of Vrindavan and Mother Yasoda and so on, this meditation. He wrote to someone, I saw this, he said, this meditation process is very difficult. But chanting Hare Krishna is not very difficult. I mean, we got to avoid the offenses, but it's not a heavy task.
I think he was referring to what they call Astakaliya Leela, that Krishna is doing something at every hour of the day, something different.
Yeah, I mean, that Srila Prabhupada never emphasized that. He above all emphasized preaching and distributing the knowledge to the non-devotees.
Right. So I went to see a godbrother that took shelter of one of the Gaudiya teachers or acharyas. And this godbrother was, he was famous for his dedication in book distribution. And I wanted to go out for the day to hand out invitations, to invite people back to take prasadam. I was just visiting for a couple of days. Hadn't seen him in decades. And when I asked for invitation cards for his center, they had none. He explained to me that being dedicated to book distribution also can mean writing books. Because I don't know if it was that the BBT would not, I heard at one point the BBT would not provide him with any books. So he had to write his own Bhagavad Gita because he couldn't get any Bhagavad Gitas. And so I'm thinking, well, it's certainly not my position to criticize a godbrother who's writing books on our Siddhanta about the Leelas of Krishna. But at the same time, he was a huge inspiration for book distributors in ISKCON, but as a god sister mentioned to me that sometimes visits a Gaudiya temple because it's close for her. She said, even though there's a god brother there who was initiated in sannyas by Prabhupada, he doesn't mention Prabhupada, and they don't do any Harinam, and they don't distribute Prabhupada's books. But at the same time, they chant Hare Krishna and they do kirtan and they worship deity and they eat prasadam. And
Okay, well, let them have their Kanishta position. Let them be Kanishtas. This is a Madhya movement. This is a preaching movement. So I'm saying that that association with that concept reduces the preaching spirit. That's why Srila Prabhupada didn't want us associating with his God brothers.
uh-huh.
And not only his God brothers, disciples, they have the same mood. They have the same, like father, like son. They have the same mood. And if they're preaching, it's because they've been associating with preachers from ISKCON, or they invite their gurus to come and visit them in different parts of the world, and they set up a little center or something in their name. But it's not the same mood. It's not the same spirit as you just described. They're not reaching out. Where are those cards? Where are the invitations to come for the love feast? Where is it come to congregational chanting? Where is it? It's not there because it's not their mood.
No, it's more of a Bhajananandi mood that we're going to go
Exactly.
higher. We're going to go deeper into the Shastra. We're going to go deeper
Yes,
into the tattvas. We're going to boil the milk.
yes. That Bhajanandi came to my mind exactly when you said that. We are Goshanandis, not Bhajanandis. Goshanandis. There's a difference. And we'll get from preaching to people and distributing books what everybody else thinks they're going to get from meditation. We're going to get it by blessings, by revelation, for our service to Srila Prabhupada. That's why I read to you that point where Krishna says, I consent to reveal myself in proportion to the service to my pure devotee. Now, serving Srila Prabhupada is the essence of Yuga Dharma. Okay? It's the essence of Sankirtan, because he is the person who spread it all over the movement, all over the world.
Right.
That's all. And anything less than that, any emphasis on anything less than that is not acceptable to a disciple of Srila Prabhupada or anyone who claims to be his follower.
It's not Prabhupada's program.
So I watched that video and I understand why they don't come back anymore, because they take offense that I don't attribute as much to Narayan and Sridhar that they do. You see,
Yep.
part of the response against the misbehavior of the gurus was to overemphasize the position of Narayan and Sridhar. That was part of the defense of the devotees who were being offended. They responded, many of them, because they weren't that advanced at that time anyway, many of them responded by accentuating their relationship with Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers or Narayan as a reaction. Srila Prabhupada is not the founder, Acharya of Ritvikism. Yasodananda is. You see? So that's what happened. And so that's what happened. And that's the history. So when we had this discussion, that I could see that I was losing it. I can see that I was losing my temper, my patience, because I've been hearing that so much for so long. And I understand it's, when I said boilerplate, it's just like, the mainstream media. It's like everybody's got the script, everybody says the same thing. I'd heard those words verbatim before, what he said, But I'm not talking about management. I'm talking about Vaishnava, which is beyond management. Like, we're all Vaishnavas. No, Vaishnava has meaning in this age. Vaishnava means preacher. Vaishnava means teacher. Vaishnava just doesn't mean, shall we say, scholarship alone. That's the difference between Goshanandi and Bhajanandi. It's a mentality. They're both Vaishnavas, for goodness sake. Look, there's 3 sampradayas, Vaishnava sampradayas from time immemorial. And none
Or
of them
4.
came out,
Yeah.
4 altogether, but 3 others besides ours.
Right.
Those 3, did they ever come out preaching?
Not that we hear of.
No. Did they ever come out to the rest of the world?
No.
No,
No.
they stayed in India and preaching in India quite nicely. That's all right. But what about the rest of the world? It's Lord Chaitanya's mission for the rest of the world. And that's our movement. It's a special movement. And the other movements don't accept Lord Chaitanya as a Shaktavesh avatar, not Shaktavesh, as the Yuga avatar. They don't accept him as the same category of Krishna, the same Varna as Krishna. They don't accept him as Krishna. Prabhupada mentioned Nimbarka specifically, his followers. They don't, whether he did or not, I don't know. But his followers don't accept. They think Lord Chaitanya was a great prophet.
Right.
So we're blessed. We're so fortunate that Lord Chaitanya appeared in our sampradaya because of Radharani being in our sampradaya along with Krishna. Okay. So it's a very essential thing to understand that, that Srila Prabhupada's followers are empowered. We don't need anybody else. We don't need to go to anybody else's books. All we need to do is follow Srila Prabhupada.
I get you. I totally get you. Here's my question though. That if for whatever reason someone decides, a godbrother or godsister decides to do that, can we acknowledge that they've done that without writing them off?
Done what?
Without making them, like, if in an assembly, if in a Zoom, we have godbrothers and godsisters that are multi-sangha, so to speak. They've gone to these other Gaudiya Sangas, and they've developed some affection for these other teachers in addition to Prabhupada. Can we still interact with them without letting them know that, no, sorry, don't agree with what you're doing?
They'll bring it up. Because I find that persons who are going to these other groups are more fanatical about their position than we are. And I take my position, which seems to be not exactly fanatical, but what is the word?
Orthodox?
Huh?
Orthodox?
No. Well, that's closer. I keep forgetting the word because it's anyway.
Radical? No.
Okay, so I'm radical. I admit it. Because this is the way Krishna made me. That's the way Srila Prabhupada made me. He made me a radical. He made me a watchdog. I don't tolerate changes in Srila Prabhupada's books. I don't tolerate changes in the mission. But I can say I don't disrespect those devotees, but I'm not going to follow them. I'm not going to associate. I'm not going to accept their points of view because it's not Srila Prabhupada's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Srila Prabhupada's point of view. See, they don't understand. The Srila Prabhupada never went anywhere. They think that he went somewhere and they have to find shelter of somebody else. The problem is, even though those persons pass away, they still follow them.
Well, the argument that I've heard is that a devotee must always be anugatya, which means simultaneously giving shelter to others and always under the shelter of a more senior devotee, and that there's always an advanced Mahabhagavat on the planet at any given time. I mean, it's up to us to seek them out and find them. That's what I've heard from them.
Yeah, you hear that from them because they're physically oriented. They don't understand that Srila Prabhupada's here.
Uh-huh.
They're space-time oriented. They don't understand that Srila Prabhupada is here, never went anywhere. There's no need to take shelter of anyone else. It takes shelter of Srila Prabhupada more.
Okay. Oh, no, okay. I get it. Wonderful. I don't disagree. What about when Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami mentions that although the Diksha Guru is one, there can be many Shiksha Gurus, and one should not
Agreed.
one should not think the Diksha is better than the Shiksha. One should, honor them all. So my question is, okay, in the physical
So
absence of Srila.
wait a minute. Srila Prabhupada says in Chaitanya, Shiksha and Diksha are identical.
Right.
Listen,
Okay.
listen, they're identical. They're identical, but their dealings are different. Now, identical means the Shiksha preaches nothing differently than the Diksha. They're identical. The Diksha for this age is Srila Prabhupada's mission to spread the movement of the holy name. That's the Yuga Dharma. This is the golden age we're in.
Right.
So Srila Prabhupada is the Acharya, okay? And his books are the Acharya books, okay?
Right.
So his mission is the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. So there's no equal to that person. There's no equal to Srila Prabhupada. There may be Shiksha aside from Diksha, but he better be preaching the same thing. Otherwise, they're not identical. And if they're not identical, listen, the Shiksha is not identical with the Diksha Srila Prabhupada, they should not be accepted as equal.
I see your line of thought.
They should not be accepted as authoritative. Because Diksha means Srila Prabhupada. And Shiksha is other person may be considered identical with Srila Prabhupada. Who is there who's identical with Srila Prabhupada? We cannot say Sri Maharaj was identical with Srila Prabhupada. We can't say Narayan Maharaj was identical with Srila Prabhupada. They did not have the spiritual power that he had.
Okay, yet at the same time, Prabhu, you mentioned earlier how Srila Prabhupada had so much love for Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He wanted all of his disciples to come and benefit from hearing from him. So if Prabhupada felt that way at one point, why is it that afterward?
That's not the motive of Srila Prabhupada. His motive, remember, Sridhar was responsible for dividing up the Gaudiya Maths.
What was his reason for doing that? Do you know?
They were fighting over who was going to be the next Acharya.
Ananta Vasudev.
Yes. He was the jackal, Srila Prabhupada called a jackal. Called him a jackal. So they fought over, they were not supposed to be trying to have an Acharya. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur said, you have a GBC. There's no Acharya. I don't want an Acharya. Just like Srila Prabhupada didn't want an Acharya. And they disobeyed Srila. They disobeyed Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur and fought over the Acharya. Who's going to be the next Acharya?
So Srila Sridhar Maharaj supported Ananta Vasudev?
I don't know whose side he was on.
Okay. Yeah.
I think they were on opposite sides. It doesn't matter. The Gaudiya was divided into two halves.
I'd like to understand what the reasoning was. What was the thinking?
Anyway, I'll tell you frankly, we don't have to worry about that. The more important it happened. It's a historical fact. Srila Prabhupada said it. In my letter was so full of explanations of what was going on. It's amazing how it's misunderstood.
I'd be really interested, if it's possible, to get a copy of your original letter that you wrote to Prabhupada, that you received that April 28th response from him. Do you have that letter handy? I'd love to hear it. I know other devotees would like to hear. What was the letter that you wrote to Prabhupada that you got back that April 28th, 1974 response?
Okay. Incidentally, the letter of notice to all sinners was written on November 75, the following year of my letter. So Srila Prabhupada hadn't changed his attitude. And if you give me I have it right here.
Okay.
I have it right here.
Okay, I'm just getting some water. Yes. I'm listening.
I'm going to read it.
Thank you.
So this is my monthly report, GBC zonal report.
What's the date?
April 17th, 1974. Okay.
Okay.
So in this letter, let's explain to you why I found it.
And where were you, the GBC, at that time?
East Coast.
Okay.
This is a special letter written to him in reference to what I found. Anyway, this is part of the reason why I wrote this letter. The other part was about the political party and God We Trust Party for spiritual pure leadership. The God We Trust Party for pure leadership. So this letterhead here, you can see it.
In God We Trust, Party for Purified Leaders. Yeah,
That's the letterhead of my book, my letter. Okay.
cool.
Before it was discontinued. Okay, here it is. First of all, I'll do my prayers and my own prayers, and then I say, my dear Srila Prabhupada, by your divine grace, we were permitted to visit holy Mayapur Dham, and certainly we are all feeling the purifying effects. For myself, I'm feeling a little more inclined to write one or more two of the 26th, or to experience one or two more of the 26 qualities of the devotee seem to be a little manifested in my personality. Sridhar Maharaj, quote, thanked us. Sridhar Maharaj, quote, thank, end quote, us for coming to Mayapur from all over the world to, quote, encourage them in their work, end quote. But what work are they doing? Your God brothers only revealed that they are Kanishta Adhikaris without any world vision of this movement. They have no manifest Vaishnava compassion of which you are the embodiment. That's it.
Why did you put thanked in quotation marks? Why do you not?
That's because he said that.
Okay.
Sridhar said that. We're thank you for coming here.
Okay.
To encourage us in our movement, and spreading our movement.
Right.
Or encourage them in their work.
Okay.
No, I might not have exactly the words, but this is how I remember it because it made such an impression upon me. I was thinking, well, we haven't come from all over the world here to encourage you, to help you spread your work, help you in your work. Your work is not our work. I could obviously see that they were, and first of all, and secondly, on the itinerary of the festival, this was not included. This meeting at this Bhaktisiddhanta temple down the road from the Mayapur temple.
Samadhi, Bhaktisiddhanta Samadhi. Yeah.
Was it a Samadhi? I don't know what it was. I thought it was a temple.
So. Yeah.
Anyway, we went there, but it was not approved by Srila Prabhupada. It was not on the original agenda. It was stuck on there by Achyutananda and a few other persons who were associating a lot with the Gaudiya Math.
So, excuse me, what was stuck on there?
This meeting was part of the itinerary. That's why I went there.
Okay.
The devotees were following the posted itinerary, what we were supposed to do that day, and going to this temple down the road, down Bhaktisiddhanta road there, was on the itinerary.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Prabhupada had not approved of it.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
And when he found out about it, he was upset. So I wrote this letter to let him know that I understood. I wrote this letter to let him know I understood why he was upset.
Yeah, I heard from another devotee that was in the room that he was very angry that that Achyutananda and so many others had gone. And so I felt a little bit bewildered because I thought, well, in the past, Prabhupada told Achyutananda to go and stay.
That was in the very beginning. That was long, but this is later on. This is right. 74. Things move quickly, and when his disciples took shelter of his godbrothers like he requested, his godbrothers took advantage of it. Some of them tried to reinitiate.
Van Maharaj, yeah. Mm-hmm. So what's the rest of your letter? Is that it? Really short?
That's it.
Oh, because Prabhupada wrote you a big letter back.
That's right. That's exactly my point. He wrote a whole explanation, which I had no expectation. And they say, well, Srila Prabhupada said, you're right about it, you're right about the genuineness of Sridhar. And they say, here Srila Prabhupada was saying he was genuine. No, the word is disingenuous. That was the wrong word for the typist to use. Or the better word was disingenuous. But Srila Prabhupada was saying you were right about his not being genuine, Rupanuga Das, and this is what it is. This is the truth. And then he told me a whole page and a half about the Gaudiya Math's real behavior and their motivation. You see, and they took that word because Srila Prabhupada said, you're right about his genuineness. He was saying, you're right about him not being genuine in that statement. That are coming there to help their work, coming there from all over the world to encourage them and their work. So I said, what work are they doing? They're not helping you.
Did Prabhupada agree with you?
Well, he did. The whole letter's in agreement with me. He wrote the whole letter back based on my question.
And some will interpret this. I'm not saying I am, but some will interpret. Oh, that's Rupanuga's offensive mentality that he's doubting like this. That he's thinking he was not genuine.
Are you kidding? The whole letter explains how he wasn't genuine. The whole letter explains how his godbrothers are not genuine. The whole letter explains how they had no heart for preaching. The whole letter says that at one point that my Guru Maharaj left sooner. He was disgusted. He would have stayed longer, he said.
Yeah.
But he was disgusted. He was 62 years old, Prabhu. How old are you?
67 now.
I'm 82.
Yeah.
And he left 20 years before me. And I can still talk and walk. So he left earlier because
he left untimely, prematurely.
Absolutely. Srila Prabhupada said so. Otherwise, he was disgusted. Otherwise, he would have stayed longer.
But devotees who have developed affection for those who have given them love and affection in the Gaudiya Mat or the Gaudiya Samiti, Vedanta Samiti, they don't like to hear this letter from Srila Prabhupada to you. They'll blame you. They'll blame the messenger or the one that the receiver. They'll blame you before they blame Prabhupada. Because then they'll say, oh no, but later on Prabhupada said, no, we should take shelter of Sridhar Maharaj. We should take shelter of Narayan Maharaj.
That's not true. It's just not true. He never said we should take shelter of anybody.
So they've conflated.
He never said leave my shelter. It's just he changed from Srila Prabhupada Vapu to Srila Prabhupada Vani. That's all. And Sridhar, where's Sridhar Vani? Where's Narayana Vani? They're going to have their followers. They're still following them, although they're gone, right?
Right.
So Srila Prabhupada's followers, his disciples, were supposed to follow him, even though he's, quote, gone. Why are we not, why are we questioning our loyalty to Srila Prabhupada by going to someone else and saying, well, it's okay, they go to somebody else who passed away already. They're still going. Why?
Why? Because maybe they can't work with the GBC. Maybe the GBC kicked their butt and told them don't go and don't come back.
Well, I don't work with a GBC. I was on a GBC 18 years. I don't work with them. You don't work with them. You don't work with them.
No.
So you don't have to work with a GBC. Why do you have to work with a GBC?
Because Prabhupada said that your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate together to keep this institution together after I am gone.
That's nonsense. Where did he say that? Where did he say that?
It's in the Leela Mrita. Prabhupada's in the heart.
The second part, after I'm gone, you stay together anyway. What happens? Look, after he's gone, Srila Prabhupada's Vani's there. If we don't follow Srila Prabhupada Vani, and this brings up a whole other thing. I gave you those quotes. And what she says, if someone feels that the movement is off, in effect, they don't have to follow. They can come to me directly. That's the gist of those quotes.
I'm not sure if you gave me those quotes. I can't recollect.
I
Maybe you gave it to someone else.
No, it was you.
Okay.
I either wrote them or I gave them to you. Or either. Anyway, I sent it to an email. I sent it to you in an email. So
Maybe I missed them.
you did.
Send them again if you don't mind.
I'm not going to. Because
Okay.
the whole issue is that he gave permission during his presence for devotees who were having difficulty with the leadership to deal with him directly.
How do you equate that today?
What?
Okay, Prabhupada said that when he was physically on the planet. How do you substitute that today if we're not able to connect with the local GBC leadership? Then it would seem that the only way to connect with Prabhupada is by reading his books and talking with his disciples and
And
listening
hearing
to his lecture.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's Srila Prabhupada Vani connection.
Yes.
Let me explain. He always considered Srila Prabhupada Vani and Srila Prabhupada Vapu as to be the same. When Srila Prabhupada Vapu was gone, we just simply took shelter of Srila Prabhupada Vani. That's what was supposed to happen after he disappeared.
Right.
The GBC didn't do that. They took advantage of the grieving society and put on their own plan. There's a saying in Bengal, a grieving woman, a woman in grief is easy to seduce.
Because she's in a
woman,
weak state.
yeah,
Yeah.
seeking shelter. So that's what they did. The society was in a mood, was in deep grief,
Yes.
and they made their move. And by the time everyone started waking up, it's too late. It only took them a year or so to dig in. They started initiating right away.
So because devotees had a hard time getting along with people who were portraying themselves as if they were Mahabhagavats, and you like even Mahatma Prabhu said to me, he observes in ISKCON that there are those God brothers who have lots of facility for preaching and other God brothers who have very little facility for preaching. He said it would be proper if those who have a lot of facility would offer some of that facility for those who have less.
They not only did that, they replaced their God brothers with their own disciples.
Yes. Yes, their disciples are the ones that become the temple presidents under them. Their disciples are the one that gives the Sunday lectures.
So I can tell you this, there will be people in the future who will be free of these controversies, and they will accept Srila Prabhupada in his books. They will have no doubt. I'm talking about his original, unadulterated, uninterpolated books. They're still out there.
Right.
And the Lord in the heart will make sure that people who require them will get them. And they will understand Srila Prabhupada's there. There'll be no controversy for them. The search will be over for them, just like it was for us. But the searching still goes on, and that's a mistake. The searching should end with his books. And the power in those books should be taken up and transformed. And people should be transparent mediums for that power.
Yes. That's our task.
That's the real movement. That's the unadulterated, that's the Hare Krishna movement, is in Srila Prabhupada's books. So there's no need to go to other books. There's no need to try to understand previous acharyas except the parts that he gave us already. He gave us the song book, and the song book says previous acharyas' songs, and we can study them. He approved that translation.
Well, we'll give a little bit. We should give some. Chutananda told me he compiled that book at Srila Sridhar Maharaj's ashram.
So?
He learned those songs there, and he studied Bengali, he said, and Sanskrit. So I think he gives some gratitude to Srila Sridhar Maharaj that through his ashram, he was able to compile that book for us.
Well, he's got some instruction. Originally, Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to learn Sanskrit and Bengali from his godbrothers.
Uh-huh. Yes.
That's why he sent them the Ban Maharaj.
Uh-huh.
So that's one thing. But to imbibe the Bhajananandi spirit That's not what Srila Prabhupada.
But that's a tough call, though. Go and learn these things from my god brothers, but don't become influenced by their lack of preaching.
No. It's like he said, go. They'll go learn from them, but they're not replacing me.
Right.
That's the way to look at it.
Uh-huh.
Go see them, but did that mean that he was asking them to weaken their commitment to him?
No, but that takes some maturity to do that.
It does. It does. And for some devotees like Achutananda at that time, they didn't make it clear. He didn't understand that. He was overwhelmed with the knowledge of Sanskrit and Bengali, and the tradition, the history, and all that. Very impressive. Those Gaudiya Mat sannyasis are not pushovers.
No.
They've done austerities and penances, and they learned and they preached, but they didn't have the missionary spirit.
Right. I remember Jagadish saying to me, he looked at the rules of a sannyasi in the Gaudiya Mat, how they're supposed to just sleep with one blanket on a hard floor and not wear shoes and not take any medicine. He said, no sannyasis in ISKCON would be able to function as a sannyasi in the Gaudiya Mat. They're so austere. Prabhupada made it easy for us.
They were austere because they had time to be. If you spend your time in India all the time, you would have 8 hours a day to chant 64 rounds, because sannyasis are waited on hand and foot. They get their cooking done, their laundry done, their shelter's paid for, their transportation is paid, everything's arranged for them. All they got to do is chant and give a class or something. They don't have to go out and preach anywhere. And that's 64 rounds takes 8 hours.
Right. Different mood, different emphasis, different movement.
Yeah, which is the right one. See, we have to make it a distinction. It's not that we're putting people down. It's that we're choosing the right path for preaching. It's Lord Chaitanya's mission. Srila Prabhupada is the representative of that mission. He's spreading that mission. That mission is for conditioned souls like ourselves who understand something from Srila Prabhupada, are supposed to share it with other conditioned souls.
So when devotees preach that, we should not forget that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's his external reason for coming was to spread the Yuga Dharma of Harinam Sankirtan, but his internal purpose was Raganuga Bhakti. And so therefore there's this necessity to cultivate this Raganuga Bhakti in this lifetime. And I thought, well, gee, I'm a poor Vaidhi Bhakti myself. What to speak of getting absorbed in Raganuga Bhakti?
Raganuga Bhakti is automatic at the other end of Sadhana Bhakti, and it comes as a reward for following Srila Prabhupada. It's a revelation. It's a descending process. It cannot be mechanically induced. One can meditate all day long on the gopis without developing gopi ras. When they had the Gopi Baba cult in LA, where they would sit around and read the Chaitanya Charitamrita about the intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna, Srila Prabhupada found out about, he was furious. He disbanded them.
And they were just reading from his books. They were just reading from selected parts of the CC, right?
That's right. That's what they claim. And then still he disbanded them. Because he said, first Gita, then Bhagavatam, then Chaitanya Charitamrita. And that's very important understanding. Because if you understand Bhagavatam, then you know you've got to preach. But if you jump over Bhagavatam to Chaitanya Charitamrita, without understanding the missionary spirit of the Bhagavatam, remember, the whole thing was a setup for us.
What was the setup for us? The different levels of books?
No, to sit in on the conversation with Sukadev Goswami.
Oh, okay.
Just to to sit in on the conversation with Sutta Goswami
I'm there. Yeah.
Vaishnava, right?
Right.
Why? To get the inspiration to preach. Prahlad's mood.
Mm-hmm.
Parikat Mahar's mood. Here he interrupts the discussion by, as soon as he finds out about the lower planets and people suffering, he wants to stop and talk about how do we save them? How do we get them out? And he's given atonement. He won't accept atonement because he's an ex-king. He knew atonement was constantly being repeated. That wasn't a permanent solution. So he didn't accept atonement. So he pushed on. No, well, atonement doesn't work. So it ends up with bhakti yoga, ends up with Krishna consciousness. And that's why Krishna through the Bhagavad Gita shows all the different other schools first. Because Srila Prabhupada said if he had started off the first chapter with Sarvadana Parityajya, nobody would have read the book.
Right.
So he explained everything else and said, throw it all out. Surrender to me, that's the goal. Why not get in the elevator, take the elevator? Why do you want to go up the steps? That'll take you millions of years.
Yet we heard that at a certain point when Prabhupada saw that some of his top sannyasis were falling down, he made some reference to the necessity of us establishing Varnashram. That's why there is a need to have Varna, even though
he was talking about Brahmins falling down, second initiated Brahmins were still falling down. He was saying, not everybody's Brahmin. He's like saying it's like we still have to, because some devotees are not on that level. Right. And then again, Lord Chaitanya says, I'm not a sannyasi, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Sudra, I'm not a Kshatriya. I'm an eternal servant of the Lord. And that's the understanding. The sannyas doesn't mean anything but giving up sense gratification.
Right. Everything, mind, body, and words for Krishna.
So Srila Prabhupada said, what is a sannyas? It's a bluff. You have nothing to give up. You have nothing to surrender. Krishna owns everything's Krishna's. What are you giving to Krishna? It's already his.
Sannyas is a bluff.
He said that.
Yeah.
It's a bluff. Because what have you got to renounce?
Right. The only thing you have to renounce is your ignorance that you have anything to renounce.
The only thing that you have to renounce is sense gratification. And then a grihasta he said there can be a brahmachari grihasta. A grihasta can be a mahatma if he gives up sense gratification. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of the whole Varnashrama system is to give up sense gratification.
So
he also said at one time he didn't want to have any more sannyasis. He told a GBC member, I don't want any more sannyasis. They can't stay, they fall down.
Well, I also heard he didn't want to perform any more marriages either, because we're jumping around with different wives.
And he didn't. He stopped performing marriages. Left it up to temple presidents.
So I appreciate your total loyalty to Srila Prabhupada. That's why it's so refreshing to have your association. Having said that, I've heard that, for example, in Hawaii, there's a temple there. I don't know if it's in Hilo or where exactly, but there are followers of Srila Prabhupada, and there are followers of Narayan Maharaj, and there's followers of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and there's followers of Bodhayan Maharaj, and they all come together and they chant Hare Krishna, and they hear the Shastra. I think Gopa Vrindapal, our godbrother, gives class there. He's quite... And they honor prasadam, and they give each other hugs and Hari Bol. It's not like, what? You left Prabhupada for Sridhar Maharaj, or you left for Narayan. That mood doesn't exist there.
Okay, so my question is, then what? You walk out the door, then what? What about the people?
Okay.
If you preach there's unity, anybody can get together and chant. Congregational chanting was going on in New Zealand with the non-devotees.
Right.
And prasadam was being taken with the non-devotees.
Right.
So you can take prasadam in a congregation spirit, you can chant in a congregation spirit, but what about the people? Where do they go when they walk out the door? All those different devotees and different followers and different gurus and stuff. What do they do?
Um,
Do they go on Harinam together? Or do they go preaching door to door? Or do they distribute books, the original, the real books that have potency? Or what do they do to spread the movement?
that I don't know. That's a good question.
They're certainly taking good care of themselves.
Right. I heard that one time Srila Prabhupada received, or he wrote a letter to Rameshwar Prabhu, and he was preaching to Rameshwar, expanding the book distribution, and on and on. But then at the very end, he said, "But a higher principle than saving others is to save yourself."
Ultimately, we have to, because he said, we came in this world alone. We're alone. We're actually alone.
I know.
Then he says, the flight is a solo flight.
Right.
You can take training and training. The time comes you have to go solo. And if you are trained well and you've taken the training well, then you'll make it.
Right.
So in the end, it's a solo flight. He said we came in this world naked and empty-handed, and we're going out naked and empty-handed.
Yep.
So the whole training is to remember Krishna at the time of death. That's taking care of yourself, training yourself to be ready for death. But that doesn't mean we don't preach. We preach because we got to tell other people, make this the last death. We got them to believe in the next life.
In the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, the flower plane comes for him when he looks back and he sees his mom. I think her name is Sunita, and he extends his hand to help her onto the flower airplane. And Prabhupada in the purport says, "One cannot go back to Godhead unless they help others to do the same."
That's the secret. The way you go back to Godhead is first trying to help others.
Yes.
Whether you are successful or not is not the question. The question is you try to help others.
Just like I met Dan yesterday in the health food store, and he ended up coming on the broadcast. That was great.
Yeah, I was going to say to you that actually that was like a precursor of what I call the Perfection Home program, because he wanted to take you to visit other people he knows. And if you go there and say to them, I've come here with a message for you. This message is for you to develop Krishna consciousness here in the comforts of your home. And here's how you do it. You just need this picture of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and I'm going to show you how to chant. And I'm going to give you some prasadam. And you can fix prasadam yourself by just cooking things that don't contain milk, fish, meat, fish, or eggs, or garlic, or onions. And you can offer to this picture as part of the yoga process. Isn't it nice to be part of a yoga process, to have eating as part of the yoga process? Eating pure food besides chanting and dancing. This is a nice yoga process. You have to learn how to preach to people to take advantage of their own homes where they're happy and comfortable already, where they might even have a book on the shelf. So you're being given.
They don't have to drive an hour or 2 hours to have to come to a temple. Yeah,
that's right. And you don't have to wait for Sunday to go there.
Right.
So look, when I heard that Dan picked up on this. I saw him. He picked up on this whole idea of chanting at home and doing it at home.
And he asked me, he said, I'm going to invite my friends over and we'll have a kirtan here.
There you go. I'm telling you, it's automatic. It just you have to just start it. And what you can do, because you always say, I'm alone out here and all that, what you can do is you can be a circuit preacher. All you have to do is find out people who are doing the Perfection at Home program and go there from time to time and encourage them.
Right.
And tell them you're on the right track. Answer their questions like a circuit preacher.
Yep.
This thing could be set up all over the country, all over the world.
Yep.
We would actually have a cultural roots.
Prabhupada said there's no question of unemployment in Krishna consciousness.
So now you're no longer alone. You've got yourself a process for preaching besides this Zoom. You can Zoom yourself over to these people's homes and preach to them.
We're going to have a Zoom tonight in your home.
What's that?
Tell them we're going to have a Zoom tonight right here in your home.
But however you want to do it.
Yeah.
however you want to do it. You have to use your intelligence, but you can see how when you do that, it's not churchianity. It's a cultural
No.
movement. It's a
It's
cultural movement.
grassroots. It's grassroots.
And that's what we have to do. Never mind, as I said before, we've got to get out of the ISKCON box or the box that these devotees are in here. This is Narayan, this is Sridhar. This is all the same kind of box, you know. That's okay. It's okay. Talk it up. We can all disagree or agree, but what about the people? What about spreading the movement?
Okay, so you're speaking very. I really like your mood right now. It sounds very ecumenical. In other words, fine, the different devotees may be in different camps, but if we're all willing to go on Harinam Sankirtan together, then that's glorious.
That's true. And distributing the books, but also we have to remember, Srila Prabhupada introduced this preaching at home program in 1967.
Right.
And again in 74, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita story about Kurma Brahman and Lord Chaitanya preaching in South India. He taught him the same thing that we're talking about now. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada said, this is our movement. So they have to understand what the next step is. The first step was initiation, then make some brahmacharis and make some grahastas, then later make some sannyasis and some vaishyas and start some farm projects and open more temples all over the world. Okay, then we got Sunday programs. The Srila Prabhupada said, this is not a churchianity that you come here once a week and go home. He wants them, he said, we want people to take the idea, not that everyone should join this society, we want everyone to take the idea home and introduce it in their private life.
Right.
What does that mean? It means home. Home is where the heart is, you know. Home, the hearth of the home. That's it. People, that's how we get the movement to be a cultural movement. Right now, it's not a cultural movement. It's becoming an organized church. Srila Prabhupada didn't want that. He wanted it to be a spread out movement amongst all the people. He wanted it to be a cultural movement. And you cannot have a cultural movement unless you have roots in people's homes.
Every town and village.
And it doesn't mean having weekly, it doesn't mean getting everybody together for a festival once a week. It means that people practice at home.
Becomes a way of life.
Yes, he said, this is not churchianity. Our movement extends into every way of life, everybody's life, whatever they're doing. They end up working for Krishna. They dovetail for Krishna. If they're butchers, they got to stop being a butcher. They may have to stop doing something. But Lord Chaitanya said, stay in the place you're at. Just stay where you're at and chant the holy name. So if you're home, if you got a job, if you got a family, then chant the holy name. That's the movement. And if you do that, then we're going to have a cultural movement that Srila Prabhupada started. He started a cultural movement and an educational institution. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta had the educational institution, but he couldn't spread the cultural movement outside of India because they already had the tradition. They didn't understand the importance of taking it outside.
No, but Bhakti Vinod, he did predict. He said one day in 1896, maybe whatever year it was, I think, the Russians and the Americans and Germans will all come together in Mayapur and chant Jai Sachinandana Nitai Gauranga.
Yeah, it's happening already. It's happening already.
There's more. Almost sometimes there's more Russians in Mayapur than there are Bengalis.
They have their own program.
Right.
There's a Russian community here too in Alaska. And they
Now,
go out on Harinam.
Right. Now, one godbrother was saying to me, although, he's been an ISKCON devotee for 50 years, he says when he goes to the local Alachuba temple, people will ask him, what are you doing here? And, you're not supposed to be here. He said, even though he may not be completely in alignment with everything about the Srila Narayan Raj community, they smile at him, they welcome him, they treat him with love. So, he goes there when he wants to go for association because he's not welcome at the local ISKCON temple. He wrote a very strong book about how Prabhupada said that how did he call it? The sinister society has entered into our movement. So he wrote a book based on that, about
Come on,
how,
Dinesh, you are? Talk about Dinesh.
yes, how ISKCON's being infiltrated. But so he's banned from the Alachua community. But he said when he visits the Narayan community, he's treated with smiles and kindness, and
Yeah,
he,
that's because they're also against this stuff. They are really actually against this stuff.
the Narayan community.
Of course. That's how they thrive. That's how they got started.
All the ISKCON refugees.
Yes. So
Yes.
it's to their benefit to distribute the original books and to because they're also recruiting.
I see. So you're saying even though they're a separate sangha, if they can distribute Prabhupada's original books, this is very nice.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The Ritviks do it.
Yes, they do. Matter of fact, those original books are looked at now in places in ISKCON as Ritvik books. They don't even consider these are the books that made 5,000 Prabhupada disciples. They just see them, oh, these are unauthorized Ritvik books.
They call them Ritvik books.
Well, they equate.
Yeah,
Original.
that's like same thing.
Yeah.
You see how far things have gone, you see? So therefore I'm saying the solution is to carry out instructions, the principal instructions of Srila Prabhupada. What were they? Harinam, book distribution, and preaching. Book distribution is not exactly equivalent to preaching. There's got to be some preaching out there in book distribution too. And what I'm saying is preaching coincides with the next step in the movement that is obvious we have to take. Why? One thing is we have to do, those of us who are loyal, faithful to Srila Prabhupada Bhani, we have to do a little end run around ISKCON, because ISKCON is not trying to install a cultural movement. They're trying to make an organized religion. It's a different thing. It's a different conception. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur warns against doing that. In his essay, Organized Religion, he says, the idea of an organized church in an intelligible form indeed marks the close of the living spiritual movement. And what does living spiritual movement mean? It means preaching. And he says, they indeed indicate a desire on the part of the masses to exploit a spiritual movement for their own purpose. They also unmistakably indicate the end of the absolute and unconventional guidance as a bona fide spiritual teacher. So we see this emphasis has reduced Srila Prabhupada's influence.
The emphasis on organized religion?
Yes.
And what does that look like? Like, what does ISKCON need to be doing to not be an organized religion?
ISKCON has to train the people that come to their temples to take the idea home and introduce in their private life. That's what
isn't that a given? Isn't that a given?
It's not a given. He said in that same statement to Roy Rama, he said, not that everyone has to become a member of our society. That's the emphasis they have now. But he said, we want them to take the idea home from the society and introduce it in their private life. That's different. That's not churchianity. That's not Sunday Christianity. That's not Sunday beats alone. It's spreading a movement, making it a cultural phenomenon. Mm-hmm. You cannot replace Darwinism, which is now, and some neo form of it, which is now the paradigm the world is following. Okay? We're born to die. That's the purpose of life. Right now, another cultural alternative is required to save the people from wasting their human life.
Right.
And this is the only movement that can do that.
But Jai Pataka Swami, as head of congregational development For years and years and years, he's been promoting this Bhakti Vriksha program, which means basically home programs, which is basically related to Bhakti Vinod Thakur's Namahata program, going to every home and helping people set up temples, teaching them how to do kirtan, prasadam. Like,
So where's the result? The idea is this. The
he has 50,000 disciples or something, so I guess that's one result.
Well, I mean, depends on what your measurement of success is. The quality is also there.
Yeah.
We're not interested in quantity. We want quality. Besides, the Namahat program that Bhaktivinoda Thakur started was a village program. They went to the villages, and the common denominator was a culture which they all knew or heard about or were born into. And so it was natural for festivals to develop. If you read Bhaktivinoda Thakur's book on Namahat, you'll see he had particular titles he gave people. He gave particular assignments that he gave people to go into the villages, and he gave them names. I have a copy of the book. I've looked at it.
I think I may too. Yeah.
But it was a village program. It wasn't going out where people were like hundreds of miles apart or far away from a temple or out in the boondocks or farmers. It was like based on village life to get the villagers not just to practice at home only, but come together for festivals and to hear the local preachers. It was like more of a village program. That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's not what I'm talking about. It's not like that. No, it's not like that. But like you already see that you are a connection between people, homes, because this boy wants to introduce what you're teaching him into other people's houses. And there's no reason why you can't be invited to go and preach there, and why you can't teach them how to set up on their own at home, and how you will come back from time to time as a circuit preacher, so to speak. That's the kind of namahat we can do here.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get a few of those people together, then you can say, why don't we get together for a meeting this month? We get to meet each other and have a kirtan and make a little festival out of it, have a big feast, and everybody introduce everybody else.
Mm-hmm. That sounds a little bit like the counselor program that Radhanath Swami has in Chaupati, where they have one devotee that has like 12 devotees under his care, and then out of that group, another person becomes a counselor for 12 more devotees, or what they call cell. The Christians call it cell preaching.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Besides, I'm not going to get into it here now with Radhanath Swami preaches. But he's in my opinion, he's a motivational speaker.
And he's developing other brahmacharis to be the same.
I know some people who were working with him on his Eco Village program and tell me that he had made compromise with impersonalists. And some of the brahmacharis were coming to them and saying, "What do? We don't want to preach to these people that they could take coffee and it's okay and all stuff like that. We want to, preach a straight brahmachari life, And they were waiting on them, serving them coffee."
But didn't Bhaktisiddhanta say to get them to come and hear Bhagavad Gita, we can even serve them chicken and tea?
Did he?
That's what I heard in England. Yeah. He told Bhanu. I heard that.
Was that his general principle?
No, of course not. That was an exception.
Yeah. So the British are tough nuts. Impossible. The Lord, the one big
Lord Zetland.
Oh yes, we can make you Brahmin. Just take these 4 right there. Impossible.
Impossible.
Listen, you have to remember the British have a history of exploiting India.
Oh yes.
200 years.
Terribly. So I'm in 40 minutes. I'll start up the Zoom for.
And they get special mercy. See, they get some special mercy. Okay, to get the Brits to chant the holy name, let them have a little tea. Let them have whatever it takes to get them to chant.
Right.
They needed special mercy. They were so offensive.
Right.
I mean, unlike the Americans, they didn't know from anything. But the British, they were great offenders to the Vedic culture.
Oh yes.
Macaulay, who was one of the first ones who was in charge of India, his program was, as long as the Indians have their culture, we cannot conquer them.
Right.
So
Prabhupada said he had him set, Lord Macaulay set up free tea stalls on all the corners and got everyone drinking tea. And then once he got them addicted, then he sold it. He sold it to
sure,
them.
get them to break the principles. That's how you destroy a culture. Then get them to eat meat, get them to smoke cigarettes, get them to dress like Westerners, get them whatever it takes to get to break their culture. That was the whole plan.
Right.
That's demonic.
Yeah. Insidious. Just like what's going on in the world right now with the New World Order and World Economic Forum and the jabs and all. It's a
It's all,
similar kind of colonialization.
it's all Rakshasa.
Yeah.
They're in charge. Everything that comes down is sinister because they're in charge. As
Yeah.
long as they're in charge, it's sinister. And to follow them is also sinister. It's like
Yeah.
complicit. Complicit.
Silence is violence.
So anyway, I'm really glad we had this chance to talk because
Yeah. Thank you.
I
Thank
wanted you I wanted you to understand that you're on the verge of being a pioneer and that you have an opportunity to utilize your isolation and actually turn it into something more by having people to preach to and actually developing your own association.
Sure. I
That's
get it.
very important. You've got Srila Prabhupada already. All you got to do is share him.
About a half an hour from me here, I met a lady in an antique shop, follower of Yogananda, and I asked her if she knew what kirtan was, and she didn't. So I met her at the public library. I did some kirtan. She really enjoyed it. I gave her some chanting beads. I'm not sure how much she uses her beads, but she says on her way to work every day, and when she's driving, she's always chanting Hare Krishna. When they were, threatening because she gave a donation to help the truckers protest, she was afraid her account was going to be frozen, so she was chanting Hare Krishna more. I went and I brought her a picture of Lord Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada, and Radha Krishna. And so she set up a little altar, and I said, put your food in front of the altar, say the Hare Krishna mantra. So she offers her food. She was only eating eggs. She said, do you think, she lives on 47 acres. She said, do you think I could just put the eggs in the field for the coyotes to eat? I said, yeah, that would be very good. So she doesn't eat any eggs anymore. So, and she really likes Krishna, and she's reading Prabhupada's books, and she's relishing them. She likes them very much.
Okay, so you're already doing it. So
Yeah.
stay in touch with her. She's
Yeah.
she's part of the Perfection at Home program.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you got somebody. Now you got this boy Dan. I mean, look, you're the chosen one. Take advantage. You've been left out there by yourself, so you've got to do something.
Yes.
You got to go beyond the net. You got to go beyond the computer and get face to face with these people.
A blind uncle's better than no uncle at all. Even a dead elephant has some value. So I'm going to come back in 35 minutes for Nectar of Instruction, verse number 9. But I've got a few rounds to finish, so I'm going to run away. And I hope you.
I'm not sure I'll be there tonight.
Oh, why?
Well, I'm a little tired.
Oh, go take some rest.
But this takes a lot of energy to keep discussing these same things over and over again.
Okay.
I think you're starting to get the idea. It's not a question of opposition. It's not a question of criticism. It's a very positive viewpoint that what we do now, what should we do now to spread the movement? Never mind all the disagreements or all the,
Forget the past that sleeps, and there the future dream at all living times that are with thee, and progress thee shall call.
Yeah, so here it is. Here's your progress. Here's your time that is with thee. It's being shoved down your throat. I don't think you're going to have to eat it. You're going to have to digest it.
Yes. Now, I came to the same conclusion myself. The only solution to loneliness and depression is to go out and care for others.
Yeah, make friends. Make friends. Yeah. So you're not lonely when you have friends and you have people who want to talk to you, want to hear what you have to say, enjoy being with you. It's called friendship.
Yeah, last week it was cleanup in the city. It was Earth Week. And I went not just to pick up bottles along the river here, but just to see who I could meet. And I met one lady with her 2 children. She was with another family. and she was saying, "Oh, I don't fall for this scam, this whole medical scam that's going on." And I said, "Wow, you're a good mom." She said, "Oh yeah, and I homeschool my children too." I said, "Wow, you have a lot of integrity. You're a really good mom." And I said, "Have you heard?" She said, "I'm studying the Bible now." I said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Have you heard of the Bhagavad Gita?" She said, "No, I haven't." I said, "Oh, well, I think you would love it. So I need to find out where that family is and get a
Yeah,
Gita."
because the Bhagavad Gita is personification of hallowed be thy name.
Yes, it is.
Make the connections. Like I told them in Atlanta on that TV show, I said, look, your Bible, your New Testament is filled with holy names, but they've all been translated out. O
Mm,
Lord of Lords, O King of Kings, O King of Heavenly Hosts. These are all spiritual holy names, and they've been
nice.
translated out. So all you got is a translation. It's like if you took Bhagavad Gita and wherever it said Krishna, you put the most attractive one and chanted the most attractive one, the most attractive one, the most attractive. That wouldn't work.
Uh-huh.
His name is Krishna. If you translate the name, then you lose the name. So I said, your Bible's full of holy names. When it says, hallowed be thy name, that's what it means. When Christ says, I'm there wherever persons are gathered in my name, that's what
Right,
he means.
right.
So this is the movement of the holy name. I explained that. This movement is a Yuga Dharma. This is a teaching for the age to
Mhm.
chant the holy name of God. And that way you see it's been translated out of these organized religions.
Yeah, they've almost been secularized. Religions they've been watered down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although Muslims they chant Allah's name, I don't know how many times a day they do that.
And they also sacrifice a lamb on Ramadan. They sacrifice a cow, actually.
Oh my God. Hare
They say
Krishna.
Rama, they're saying the holy name Rama, Ramadan, but they're killing a calf.
Oh, cooking a cow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a little confusion there. There's no confusion in Srila Prabhupada's movement. And that is the one he left. And that is the mission. The mission. We know what that is. And here you have an opportunity. Believe me, Srila
Yeah.
Prabhupada would be very pleased with this attempt. If you go and you try and set up these people and to be self-sufficient, reliable in the comforts of their own home. They don't need a temple. They don't need a farm. They don't just need the books and they need the holy name and they need somebody like you to come around and encourage them.
I got my work cut out for me. I got half an hour left to get some japa
Hey,
done. I hope you can get some rest so you'll come back to read about Govardhan Hill. Thanks so much, Rupanuga Prabhu. I really appreciate your company.
We can talk some more, but I hope I made myself clear.
Yes, you did. And I will share your message with those who have the ears to hear.
Okay.
Hare
Haribol.
Krishna. Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Sure, Bob.